You guys are early and you're breathing in outer space, which means everybody knows this is fake before it's even started, which isn't really a big deal. It's not like 3D animation is hard work.
Johnny recaps movies.
Sometimes from space.
I do that all the time now. You see, in space, nobody can hear you scream or welcome people to your YouTube videos. Having it, folks. As per your votes, today we'll be probing the depths of one of the most iconic sci-fi horror films of all time. And today we're going to explore why this movie's considered nearly perfect by so many people, myself included, with the occasional minor discrepancy here and there. So grab your space helmets, folks, and would you excuse me a moment? Bernadette, you forgot to gravitize my helmet again.
Sorry, you good-looking son of a bitch. I was down the hall thinking about how good-looking you are.
What's with the wig? And why are you talking to me like that?
The wig was your idea, gorgeous, and you programmed me to speak to you this way.
The fuck's going on here?
Hi, James. Welcome back.
Don't say hello to me, you fucking pervert bastard, ye.
I can only afford 2 personality profiles. You're embarrassing me in front of all of the Earth, James. Let's take a look at Ridley Scott's Alien. The movie takes place on board a spaceship, and we're shown this spaceship right away, and there's a reason for that. Large part of Alien being greenlit for production in the first place was the success of a little independent film which hit the big screen 2 years before. Both movies open very similarly in outer space with shots of their respective spaceships, but if you examine Star Wars' legendary title crawl, it paints a fantastical image of a larger-than-life battle between good and evil over a soundtrack that still sends shivers up the back of my legs every time I hear it. Alien's equivalent could serve as a great lesson in efficiency for modern Hollywood writers who tend to choose the biggest words instead of the perfect ones. Ridley Scott's chosen some very specific pieces of information to convey the kind of story we're about to watch. Commercial Towing Vehicle tells us this story world is a mundane one and not fantastical at all. And 20 million tons of anything is an inconceivable quantity to most of us, and that probably tells us this crew has been away a very long time. Returning home obviously tells us they're in the home stretch of this extended journey. And finally, keeping all of those previous points in mind, and a crew of only 7 people doing all of this work probably means things are very tense on board the ship. Compared to Star Wars, the music is barely noticeable. What you do hear sounds like it's coming at you from miles away in space, or even better, from down at the end of a very dark corridor. The tone's mundane and muted and understated, and the words are even written in lowercase letters, with the exception of the ship's name. And being a Ridley Scott movie, that's no coincidence. The name Nostromo draws a parallel to Joseph Conrad's novel from 1904 of the same name, which examines things like moral ambiguity and the corrupting influence of power. And given Alien examines the dehumanizing aspects of corporate greed, you'd probably have a pretty good idea where this doomed vessel was heading if you'd read Conrad's novel before you watched the movie. With less than 20 simple words, Ridley Scott has set the tone for this movie perfectly. You might be surprised to learn before settling on Ridley Scott, they tried hiring Robert Altman to direct, and also Walter Hill, and also Peter Yates, and another director whose name I couldn't find anywhere. You wouldn't by chance know who the other director was, would you, James? The 7 crew members are Captain Dallas, played by Tom Skerritt, Science Officer Ash, played by Ian Holm, crew members Lambert, Parker, and Brett, played by Veronica Cartwright, Yaphet Kotto, and Harry Dean Stanton, respectively, and finally, Warrant Officer Ellen Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver in her first ever major movie role. The ship's computer is deceptively named Mother. Ridley Scott would go on to establish he has a real thing for exploring human-machine relationships, but this choice also speaks to the manipulative tactics of the corporation employing this crew, given this very computer ultimately condemns them to their eventual fates in exchange for the mere possibility of financial gain. Mother wakes the crew up from hypersleep when it intercepts a mysterious transmission from a nearby moon named LV-426. The crew's obligated to investigate any potential signs of alien life as per corporation policy. Some other sets things in motion automatically while everybody's waking up. The Nostromo sustains some hefty damage during the landing phase, so Dallas, Kane, and Lambert venture out to investigate the signal's source while the rest of the crew stays behind to repair the broken ship. While they're exploring, the away team discovers a unique-looking derelict alien spacecraft, designed, like almost everything else you see in this movie, by Hans Rudi Geiger, a Swiss artist famous for blending human physiques with machines and a lot of naughty shapes.
After flipping through a book called Necronomicon that contained a lot of H.R. Geiger's artwork, director Ridley Scott knew he had to hire Geiger to help him bring his visions for this movie into the real world.
Goes without saying, without Geiger's art, this may have ended up just another sci-fi movie. His imagery is so unique and potent, it spawned a literal film universe. And in real life, the spacesuits in these scenes weren't constructed with any kind of outside ventilation, so members of the away team fainted on several occasions during filming. The alien suit itself wasn't any better. Balaji Badeo, the 6'10" Nigerian actor playing the alien, had to sit down on a custom-made swing between takes to cool down. And we won't get into their routine when he had to use the men's room. So a lot of the time when these characters looked wrecked on screen, it was because they were wrecked in real life. And again, that was by design. Once inside this ship, they come across hundreds of leathery egg-like objects in a cavernous clearing. Kane possesses a curiosity I certainly wouldn't have shared with him if I was there. And if the same situation happened right here in my space station, I'd have been all like,
These are fucking gross. James, get them into the compactor before they
Fuck off.
Bernadette, would you mind shifting these bonsai trees into the compactor for me before—
Not on your fucking life, sugar plum.
And on closer inspection of one of the eggs, the nightmarish creature many of us have come to know and love as a face hugger attaches itself to his face.
I wrote that myself.
And it attached himself to his face abruptly and without Kane's consent, because it was the 1970s and consent hadn't been invented yet. Dallas and Lambert beeline it back to the Nostromo with Kane in tow, much worse for wear obviously. When Ripley refuses to allow the potentially infected crew members back on board the ship, Science Officer Ash blatantly violates the quarantine protocol by ignoring her orders. And that decision proves a key turning point in this story.
In the nerdiest of movie structure terms, you could argue bringing the organism onto the ship represents this movie's inciting incident, or the critical event in the first act that disrupts all the characters' lives and sets the main plot in motion. It's only logical. If there's no alien on board, there's no alien movie, and everybody gets home safe and sound, right? But if you argued that, you'd be wrong.
The inciting incident happened a few seconds into the movie when Mother disrupted the characters' lives by pulling them out of hypersleep. If this seems like a boring inciting incident, that is the genius of it. Keep in mind, Ridley Scott's exploring the dehumanizing aspects of corporate greed in this movie. After they finished the huge job they were contracted for, a faceless, heartless computer wakes up these hardworking, underpaid human beings to tell them they're obligated to put their lives at risk on a hostile alien planet under threat of a full loss of pay. As human beings, we're also programmed to believe this is the way of things. Nobody protests.
For me, one of the real horrors this movie explores is not just the expendability of the human beings in the eyes of the corporation. It's the human beings' lack of resistance to the whole concept.
Ash's decision to override Ripley, who was technically his superior at the time, proves a key turning point in this story. Any tiny cracks we may have picked up on in the opening scenes in terms of the group dynamic grow exponentially and irreversibly as a direct result of Ash's actions. And those cracks play a huge role in this story being so cohesive and accessible for audiences. We have Dan O'Bannon's screenplay to thank for that. In 2023, there are hundreds of movies similar to Alien, but when Dan wrote it at the end of the 70s, there was nothing else like it. Kane remains unconscious with the creature attached to his face, and after a few failed attempts at removing it, they decide it's safer to leave it in place for the time being. Then rather unexpectedly, after a short period, the facehugger detaches itself and dies. And Kane wakes up, seemingly unharmed, but for a ferocious appetite. During their final meal together before climbing back into hypersleep for the trip home, Kane convulses, and an alien creature bursts from his chest, killing him and providing us with with one of the most well-known scenes in all of cinema history.
This film is often touted for its entire cast's authenticity, and obviously that's down to the actors. But it's also down to Ridley Scott, who decided not to tell any of the actors a creature would be bursting out of Kane's chest in this scene.
So, each of those faces are genuine reactions to the actors' cheeks and foreheads being unexpectedly covered in blood splatter. The crew members arm themselves and start tracking the creature down to kill it, but it's elusive, and their fruitless efforts help ramp up the fear factor. With the creature's whereabouts unknown, with everyone fully aware of its ability to kill people, the atmosphere goes tense and tightens with a healthy helping of paranoia. The alien picks off the crew members one at a time, which is the best way to do it if you're trying to keep an audience on the edge of their seats watching the surviving characters tortured by the process. Brett is the next crew member to be killed while he's searching for the ship's cat Jonesy, and as an 80s kid myself, and as Molly Ringwald's stand-in for Pretty in Pink, his death was particularly difficult for me. Captain Dallas dies next in the one tiny little scene that does get up my nose just a little bit. He goes after the creature in the ventilation shafts, and right before he dies, the alien does this.
Liza Minnelli jazz hands aren't exactly becoming of a supposedly perfect killing organism, are they, James?
With Dallas gone, Ripley takes over command as per procedure, and she discovers almost immediately Ash has secret orders to bring the alien back to Earth, with each of the crew members deemed expendable by Mother. When Ripley confronts Ash, she finds out the hard way he's actually an android sent along by the company to monitor everything. At the time, this was completely unexpected, and this concept of a synthetic person remained a staple of the Alien franchise, for better or worse, and a trope featured in countless other sci-fi and sci-fi horror flicks. Powerless and essentially drifting through space with an unbeatable foe hiding somewhere in the back of one of their closets, the remaining crew plans to detonate the Nostromo and make their way home in the escape shuttle. But unfortunately, Parker and Lambert's luck runs out in the home stretch, and that leaves Ripley alone with her pussy, Cat Jones. After initiating the ship's self-destruct sequence, Ripley and Jonesy head to the shuttle. They narrowly escape as the Nostromo explodes on the horizon in the Technicolor glory of 1,000 detonated pride parades. Once she's safely settled on board the shuttle, Ripley discovers the alien is snuck on without paying for a ticket. So she hops into a spacesuit, opens the airlock, chucks the alien out into the cold dark depths of space once and for all. The film ends with Ripley entering hypersleep for the long trip home after recording a final log entry about the Nostromo's fate and the loss of the crew.
And there you have it, folks, the plot for 1979's Alien. Pardon me a moment while I gush all over this movie.
The goodness.
Alien stands as a cinematic masterpiece. It's a near-perfect amalgamation of genre-defining elements. It blends horror and sci-fi seamlessly, and better than anybody else has ever done it since the granddaddy of all sci-fi horror flicks.
Come on, you know.
Dan O'Bannon's writing delivers a tight, suspenseful narrative weaving together profound themes of corporate exploitation and human vulnerability. He structured Ellen Ripley's character development to show logical and natural progression with minimal dialogue.
And as a strong female lead, she led and showed us her strength without having to tell us about her strength every 3 minutes for 45 fucking minutes.
The movie's masterfully executed editing creates a fast-paced, intense atmosphere which elevated the movie's legendary horror elements. Alien cinematography was so spot on, everybody copied it going forward. The Nostromo's interior is iconic. The lighting and the use of shadows and the intentional black paint in strategic areas crafted an atmosphere of extreme claustrophobia. And this is all in total contrast to the other iconic space imagery from a decade prior in Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. The special effects, particularly H.R. Geiger's xenomorph and the set pieces, set a new standard for creature design, blending organic and mechanical aesthetics to create a truly terrifying antagonist that made perfect sense coming from unseen origins somewhere off in space. Jerry Goldsmith's scoring subtly amplifies the film's eerie, suspenseful mood, while the entire ensemble cast delivers performances that are authentic and engaging and emotionally resonant. Their portrayals of fear and determination in the face of an unknown extraterrestrial threat grounds the film in a palpable reality, and I'll argue it does it better than any sci-fi horror film ever has.
You've got to know by now.
The Shite-Biz.
Despite its acclaim and my obvious crush on this movie, I have to take other people's thoughts into consideration when I'm doing these reviews. Some viewers take issue with the slower pace in the first half of this film, and for viewers more accustomed to fast-paced modern sci-fi, aka people with no attention spans, this might cause them to lose interest. Also, the movie's reliance on darkness and shadows, while completely effective for creating suspense, can sometimes obscure action scenes, leaving some viewers wanting more visual clarity. And finally, the technology and aesthetics of the Nostromo are very obviously reflective of the late 1970s. That may also feel dated to modern audiences. When you start noticing things like that, it can potentially reduce a viewer's immersion in the setting, and nowadays all it takes is a millisecond for somebody to jump onto their phones and be lost to the rest of the story.
The verdict.
So, should you watch Alien if you haven't seen it already? Or should you happily forfeit all your shares and stay comfy and cozy all tucked up in bed with your companion android while the away team's out getting their faces hugged to death?
Alien is essential viewing for not just sci-fi and horror fans, but for anybody that's into movies. Its influence on sci-fi and horror are undeniable, as is its influence with movie culture and entertainment in general. It's an absolute masterclass in tension building and group dynamics and character development and thematic depth. Whether you're analyzing its technical aspects or simply enjoying a thrilling story of survival, Alien remains a captivating and compelling watch decades and decades after its release. As always, folks, thank you very much for watching the video, and until next time.